The role of the Family Employment Advisor in Knowsley is very much around supporting families who've got a long history of unemployment or worklessness, very much about supporting them, getting them into ready really and getting them into employment, but it's very much bespoke to that individual. So what are their needs? So very early on, when we first meet with the families, we will discuss all around the programme and what type of support we would be offering to them over the 52-week programme. We'd also explain very early on that even when they go into employment, we'd still be supporting them for the whole time of that journey really. Because what can happen is if they fall out of employment, we're there really to support them, and very much when they're in employment, if they haven't been in employment for quite some time, it can be quite daunting for some of our members. When they initially come for their first appointment, when they become active onto the Families programme, we will do a diagnostic, we do like a self-assessment, and then we can identify with that member what interventions or what support that member needs. So it is very bespoke to that individual, and it can be very different for each of the members within that family of what type of interventions that individual does need. I've got a couple of families within my books, mainly my members are individuals, and I work with them on an individual basis, but I do have a couple of families that I am working with. But when I have asked, do they want me to work with them as a family and the family dynamics, which I'm obviously keen to do, most of my families will sit there and say that they would prefer for me to act as just their one-to-one advisor, and they don't want that discussed with their wider family. So I do respect their wishes, and I do treat them, everything that they deal with, I treat them confidentially, and I don't discuss that wider with any of their family members because that's their wishes. Obviously the programme is very early on, and as it moves on we may have other families that join us that do want that sort of wider family dynamics. We're starting to work with our stronger families, which is that these are some of the families that have been identified by the local authority that do need that support. I should imagine as we start to have them referrals over, we may start to work with the wider family and they may want that. But at the moment I've just been working with the individuals within that family process. What I have found is when you initially first do the self-assessment, for example, you really, this is only your second meeting with that client, and you're only really, you're getting to know them, but you're identifying interventions that you think will be appropriate for that client, and sometimes what that client is saying that they'll agree to. But as the programme moves on, you get to know that client a lot more. You then find that actually there's more appropriate interventions and even the client will say, I'd much prefer to do something like that. And you realise that the needs are slightly different to what you thought they were at the very beginning of the assessment. So I think it is important that you do the 4 assessments throughout that 12-month period. And I do think, you shouldn't be so stuck in your ways to say, well, I identified them at the beginning, I need to remain with them interventions. I quite often will say, well, they're not applicable anymore, and I found something that's far more appropriate. That will obviously suit that client a lot more because it needs to be bespoke and appropriate to the client's needs, really, and I think that's important. And I found that, as time has gone on, I think you do need to reflect and think about, well, what is appropriate to them clients' needs. An example of seeing a person really progress is very early on the programme. Had a lady that came to me, she had a young baby, she'd moved away from the area where she was originally from, which was Ireland. She didn't have a lot of friends and family here. She had really, really low confidence. So initially, I was obviously supporting her around her confidence building. I put her on appropriate courses that really supported her. She was really, really keen to do a number of courses in order to support her getting into employment. And she, to be honest, she was one of the ones that we probably put her on about 7 interventions. She was really keen. And I noticed at first she really didn't want to do anything. And all of a sudden, once she started to go on one intervention, she was really keen to go on others. And the last thing we put her on was a sector route way, which was working, they did like a 2-week intervention, which was around pre-employability. And they got an MVQ qualification in retail. And at the end of that, they got a guaranteed interview to work for The Range, which is a brand new retail shop that's just been set up in St Helens. And she was successful in gaining employment in there. And now when I speak to her as part of our in-work support, she is absolutely thrilled to bits. She really loves, she says her life just feels so much different. And she's only been with the programme about 5 or 6 months, but the difference is fantastic. And I think she's really been on a really lovely journey, and it's really nice to see as an advisor.